When you think of Paris, you think of the Arc de Triomphe, the Eiffel Tower, the Champs-Élysées, and those awesome, the Art Nouveau Paris Metro signs. But underneath all of that, there is a Paris that was lost to us to make way for all these sweeping changes. And had it have not been for one of the great unsung heroes of photography, then we would never know what it looks like. How's it? That photographer that we're talking about, the one who documented the Paris that was being lost and swept away, is an interesting figure, in so much as, he had been working as a photographer, taking pictures of all sorts of random things, streets, signs, doorways, flowers, landscapes, used as reference material by painters. So think of it a bit like the original kind of stock library. You go to Auger and say, listen, I want a picture of a fancy looking doorway to paint. And he would go, we have that here. So, so there we go. So he'd be doing this, with his old bulky plate camera. These are really big, heavy cameras. Even at that time, this is kind of the late 1800s. This was old-fashioned technology. And, he would walk around Paris taking these photographs. Around about this time, there was a period called, and I refer to my notes here because I'll get it wrong, the Haussmannization, which was started by a chap called Baron Georges Eugene Haussmann, which was all about raising the medieval Paris, getting rid of all these kind of slummy, rundown areas to build what we have as modern Paris now, all these grand boulevards and things of that nature. I think this is now a classic case of the right person being in the right place at the right time. Eugene Auger had been taking photographs, documenting the streets, things like that for ages. So he was well versed in where they were and all that kind of stuff. And he turned his attention to photographing the things that were being torn down. And when I look at these photographs, I can't but help think that maybe he's kind of lamenting the passing of this. That these are not just straight, matter-of-fact records of a city that's being lost underfoot, but that they are some way an effort by Auger to document this crumbling, decrepit Paris. And maybe he's sort of seeing himself in there. I mean, obviously we don't know, but there is something intangible almost in these photographs that makes me feel that there is something there. Now, something that is not there in a lot of these images are people. I mentioned that Eugene Auger is walking the streets of Paris with this big view camera, and it takes time to set up, and it's a longish exposure, all these kind of things. And I believe he preferred to work in the early mornings when the light was really nice and yada yada yada, all this kind of stuff. So consequently, in a lot of these photographs, people are conspicuously absent. Even though this is a city that you can see has the fingerprints of life all over it. Unlike today's modern street photography, it's not about that life, it's about the city itself, the street itself. That's what I find gives these photographs that haunting quality, is that you know that there's people there, but there's a quietness to these images that I don't necessarily see in today's photography. Maybe there's like a barking dog or something, just out of frame. But there's that. They just draw you in with this kind of ghost-like etherealness. Now, painters at the time were responding to this. So you have people like, and again, I'm going to check to my notes here because I used to make these things wrong. You got your people like Matisse, famous French painter. He was, you know, he recognized the wonderfulness of these photographs, and people like Picasso as well. Picasso ended up buying some of these prints. Auger's wandering the streets, making all these photographs, selling them to people who are, you know, collecting pictures of old Paris. It was quite fashionable apparently at the time to do this, so I dare say he wasn't the only photographer, you know, taking these pictures. There's a quality to Eugene Auger's photographs that I really enjoy. And it sort of ties back to a piece of advice that I was given as a student when I was dabbling with the idea of being a photojournalist or a documentary photographer. And Harry, one of my lecturers, he goes, you know, try and include, if possible, a street sign. Something that puts your photograph in a place. Because then way you can, you know, people can come back to it later on and see where that place was, or, you know, what it looks like now. And Auger's photography does that. That you know the streets because you sort of mark them, what have you. There are people nowadays who have taken Auger's photographs and compared them to what that same scene looks like today. I find it on one hand extremely interesting, but also very depressing and sad, because as I mentioned earlier about the, you know, the noise and the fingerprints of the life, those posters, the signs, the handwritten things, everything, you know, advertising, billboards, that kind of very transient sort of look of things, it's all gone. What was a street that was full of character and interest and probably quite smelly and all those kind of things, now is, well, it's just bland. Auger is interested in preserving that which is to be destroyed. And I think about another photographer who did almost, well, he did also trying to preserve things that were being destroyed, but in a slightly sort of different way. And his name is Robert Adams. Robert Adams was part of a group of landscape photographers who'd been labelled the New Topographics. And these were guys who were interested in man's effect on the landscape, you know, the natural landscape. And Robert Adams turned his attention primarily to Denver, Colorado. He photographed tract houses being built. And there's one particular photograph, which I love, which is this sweeping view. And there's a frame of a house there, but there is a street sign. So you can see where this is the confluence of the streets, a little intersection. And a joy to do this when you have this opportunity is to go onto Street View in Google and look at the scene today. How different does everything look? Once again, had Adams or Auger not taken the time to photograph these things, they would be lost to us forever. I used to live in Edinburgh during the summer when the festival's on. It's a hugely popular place for street photography. There's lots of things going on. There's a sort of, you know, there's action and life and performers. But when you're in a place like that and there's lots of things happening around you, it's easy to kind of not see what's going on. But when all these people are cleared out, when it was the winter, when all the shops had closed, and it was just the people who lived in the old town that left. And I used to live right up by the castle, so often in the winter it was like it was dead. That's when those voices, the fingerprints we talked about on the, you know, of the city, started to make their presence felt again. I would love for you, if you live in a place that has some history, and it doesn't need to be old history, but some sort of history, is that the next time you're walking the streets, that you don't look all for the people. You listen for the stories, the signs, those fingerprints of people. Edinburgh has in the old town a mixture of new and some extremely old stuff. And when you're not being bombarded by the, you know, there's all that stuff from modern life, you start to find little things. Faded signs written on walls that I'm sure hundreds of people walk past every day, but very few give a second thought to. It helps, of course, that you have a place that's been photographed before. So if you live in Paris, you have this, and Edinburgh was no exception. I used to work in a bookshop on George IV Bridge, and during my lunch break, I would go around the corner to Greyfriars Churchyard. And if you watch Greyfriars Bobby on Disney or something like that, it's that one is there. So I walk past these stores every day taking pictures of Greyfriars Bobby. And I would take my lunch and I would go and sit on the graves. Or sit on the graves, in the graveyard of the same places that almost a century before, David Octavius Hill and Robert Adamson, not to be confused with Robert Adams, there's a lot of Adams in photography, isn't there, would take photographs. And I look at those pictures and what I find absolutely mesmerizing, fascinating, is that scene looks almost the same as it does today. There's something magical about standing in almost the same spot as a famous photographer did, taking a photograph that has outlasted them, and wondering, what was it that them standing exactly where you are now caught their attention about that grave, about that street, about that piece of wall, that corset shop. Eugene Auger's pictures of that lost Paris were, well, they were lost for a little while, but Bernice Abbott found them, and just before Eugene Auger passed away, I believe, and also gave us the only photograph known of him. And she was instrumental in taking these images to the New World, to America, and introducing them to a wider public, where they influenced a host of photographers, Walker Evans among them, and sort of helped to kickstart this, this growing movement of what's called straight photography. And there is a quote by Ansel Adams, which I think is very apt. Adams wrote in 1931, 4 years after Auger's death, that the Auger prints are direct and emotionally clean records of a rare and subtle perception, and represent perhaps the earliest expression of true photographic art. Whether or not you agree with that statement, who knows? But he has definitely left us with a lasting legacy, not least the beginning of street photography. If you want to find out more about Walker Evans and his fantastic photographs of that 1930s Depression America, which followed hot on the heels of the discovery of Auger's prints, check out this video over here. Thank you ever so much for watching, and I will see you again soon.